a guest with me today, and we are super excited. We're going to be talking to you a bit about like what we wish we'd known before moving to Canada and what we've learned. Our goal is to help newcomers to Canada not make some of the same mistakes we made, and also have a bit of a perspective from two people who immigrated to Canada from different parts of the world. And yeah, so definitely, if you guys have questions, leave them either in the comments below, or if you're here for the live chat, you can leave them in the live chat as well. This video, if you do have to leave early, will be rediffused afterwards, which is really exciting. And we'll try and answer as many questions in the comments as we can. Our goal is to be super helpful for today. So Nesreen, she's actually a real life friend, which is why this is like way more exciting. And she's a lot better at finances than I am. And I frequently call her and ask her for help or questions. She's also great at problem solving. She is a friend when I'm in a stitch that I call and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So yes, yes, this is my friend Nazreen. Nazreen, do you want to tell a bit about yourself, like your background, where
Sure,
you've immigrated from, that type of a thing?
absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a true pleasure. And thanks to Patty, I have started my own channel. It's all her. So thank you for that. It took a lot of courage and a lot of pushing from her side. So again, thank you. So my background, my name is Nisreen. I'm also known as the Mindful Money Mom. I am a mom of four, two 9-year-olds, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old. I have a master's in business and administration. We moved here 35 years ago this year, believe it or not. So I have a bit of an interesting background in that I remember having been in Qatar, is where I was born, but my family is Christian Palestinian in origin. So that's a discussion for another live.
Yes.
But we have a lot of experiences. I've seen my parents through it all in the last 35 years. Lots of things to share, to talk about, which is why I'm here today.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. So, for my background, I have a little bit of different perspective because I only came to Canada 3 years ago, and I'm actually from the United States, and I lived in France for 10 years with my husband. But we have another perspective here. I'm also taking some things that my husband mentioned when we moved to Canada. He was really quite surprised by how things work financially here. There's quite a few things to me as an American. I was like, oh, of course. And he's like, what the heck is this? He was super confused. So those are all of the experiences that we're trying to bring together here, and hopefully give you guys some good baselines of what to expect if you do move to Canada, what you should expect financially. And yes. So, Nesreen, do you want to add anything really fast before we start and dive into the content?
Boy, it's a pretty in-depth discussion. I mean, given my background where I've done everything from working at a hospital to working at banks to working at a mortgage and lending institutions, I do have a lot of knowledge to part in that sense. But I would say the first things that I notice is how ill-prepared people are coming from other countries. The focus has
Yes.
been so much on actually just getting here, which by itself
Yes.
I completely understand is a huge struggle. But once they're here, um, till even now, I see a lot of people kind of like deer in the headlights and extremely surprised. I know one thing for us coming from the Middle East, a lot of things were covered. So the
Yeah.
word insurance became ingrained very quickly in my parents' psyche, and they had no idea how many things involved the word insurance: house insurance, car insurance,
Yeah.
kid insurance, life insurance, critical care insurance, pet insurance. Like insurance was coming out of the kazoo, and they've never budgeted for that. They never considered it as their spending. So to say
Yeah.
that their savings dwindled quickly is a major understatement. And it's important to note that I am one of seven. So when we moved here, we're a family of nine. The oldest was 12 and a half years old, and the youngest was 6 months. So again, we can go into, depending on some questions, I can share some experience, but I'm here to really give you a bit more of the experience on a holistic level. But I would say, first of all, get to know your area, get to know exactly where you're living and get comfortable. One of the things
Yeah.
that I noticed right away is everybody aggregates to what they're familiar with. So if you're from a
Right.
Spanish speaking country, everybody ends up aggregating to where everybody's speaking Spanish, which is comfortable and important. But the issue is if you stay there, then you stagnate your growth.
Yeah, it's good to like have connections with a few communities. And I love what you were saying about how like they weren't prepared for all of the additional expenses. They really, because a lot of times when we grow up in a country, That's our framework for how everything else works. And there's so many things that you assume are going to be different. Like you're like, oh, the food's going to be different, the schools will be different. But then there's tons of little details that you never take into account before you come. And like you said, when you're filling out all that paperwork, I was the one who filled out all the paperwork to have my family immigrate. And honestly, it was like a 20-hour a week job
Yep.
for months. It was a lot of intensive work. It was work. If I know there's some people who hire out, which we're going to talk about scams in a little bit. Yes, scams for newcomers are a big thing, especially while you're filling out paperwork and stuff. People are like, "I'll fill it out for you. Send me your social security number and all of this private information and thousands
Yep.
of dollars, and we'll get that set up real
To
quick."
your point,
It's
I just launched a video yesterday afternoon about the first 2 weeks and the first 2 months, exactly talking about this, just to give people, I mean, it doesn't have to be in the first 2 weeks. I would advise it that it's in the first 2 weeks and the first 2 months,
yeah,
just to get you a head start, because there is a lot of work to do. And especially when it comes to things like building your credit, that I would say is the biggest impact on your success here in Canada, because our entire financial system is based on credit, which some countries, they have it in some form, but not in the same forms that we have it here in Canada.
yeah. France doesn't have it at all. Laurent had no idea what I was talking about, and he was like, "Why would they just check your bank statements?" And I was like, "No, there's a whole system,
The
and like you
simplest
have to
the
play the
simplest thing
game."
you could do is, as soon as you come, you're gonna need to have access to your phone. Get a monthly paid plan. That is the quickest way to build your credit, because as long as you are paying it monthly, you're going to build your credit. 35% of your credit score is how well you make those payments. So even though you don't may not qualify for a credit card, faster than actually getting a secured credit card is getting a phone plan, not a
So
prepaid plan, but a phone plan.
a thing with the phone thing that we did that was a mistake was they wanted to do a credit check and we needed to sign to approve to the credit check so we could get the phone plan. That lowers your credit score when they do the credit check. It pinged our
Exactly.
credit right as we got here. And then when we did my husband's phone like a week later, we told them no, we didn't agree to do the credit check. And I thought maybe they wouldn't give us the phone. They still gave us the phone. They didn't need to do the credit check.
They did not, because you didn't even have a credit anyway. But the
It just
fact that
wasn't
it
necessary
pinged
to
that
fill in.
credit, even though it's brand new,
Yeah,
it actually
immediately took
changes your
points off.
score. I have another video actually on how to build your credit, and it goes through, there are percentages to
Yeah.
what is accounted for. And I would say in about 6 months, you could be very well on your way to building a very high credit score. Why is a credit high score important? Well, Patty, you can probably comment to that. But mortgage rates, there's a difference
Yeah.
between paying 1.99 and one paying 4.39. And if you have
Yeah.
really bad credit, you can get up to the 5%, 10%, and I've seen it as high as 19%, which is ridiculous just
Yeah.
because somebody hasn't been here before.
Yeah. So there's certain banks that do newcomer loans, but those are kind of complicated. And for me, for example, I had never lived in Canada, had no Canadian credit score, but I was born to a Canadian citizen abroad. So I automatically was disqualified for all of those because I was born to a Canadian citizen. So even though I'd never lived in Canada before, I didn't qualify for any of them. And they also, what was I going to say about? Oh, yeah, for rent, sometimes they'll want to check your credit score before they'll rent you a place. And it's almost better to have no credit at all than to have bad credit, right?
Exactly right.
So for those types of
One
things,
thing
we
you
were able
can do if you're renting is, you can, let's say you don't have any credit, as long as you have about 10 months of savings in your bank account. So it is really important that you're very strategic. I highly recommend for people to plan living in Canada before coming to Canada. And
yeah,
with the access to Google and channels like yours, channels like mine, there really is no excuse not to be informed. I know it's overwhelming. It's a
it's a lot of
huge
information.
psychological undertaking.
And some of the information is really bad. Some of it's not good.
That's exactly right. I always recommend going to Canada.ca. It has an extremely well versed
There's a
information,
lot.
that what ends up happening is people get a little bit overwhelmed. So finding someone that you can reach out to, whether it be on YouTube, go through a few videos. You're not gonna connect to a lot of people. But once you do connect, reach out to that person, because
Yeah.
I know for myself and Patty, we've taken the time out of our very busy lives with kids and everything else to build these channels truly for the wanting to help people. So you're welcome to send me a message with any questions, and I'll be more than happy.
For renting, something that we did that I would really, really recommend because of scams and stuff that are going on is we rented an Airbnb out for a month so that we would have 1 month to find an apartment. And had we tried to find an apartment before moving here, there are tons and tons of scams online because they know people moving to Canada are kind of desperate to get into an apartment. And
Yes.
they'll tell you a lot of and sometimes they're not even, it's a real apartment sometimes, but they're going to try to scam you in other ways where they're going to be like, you need to pay 6 months rent up front or you can't guarantee, we can't guarantee you the spot, which I'm pretty sure is illegal. There's a know your renter's rights before you go. Like there's the basics, right? What they should be asking of you, what they're allowed to ask, what they're not. And then also being here actually was really great because we got to see what the neighborhoods look like. Not all neighborhoods are like going to be as convenient for getting to your job as you, especially if you don't have a car. That's going to be really complicated. There was a neighborhood that we were looking to get into, and the apartment, the rent was great. The rent was like incredible, unbelievable. And I went to my bank, and the bank lady was like, "Do you have children?" And I was like, "I do." And she's like, "So I don't." She's like, "I." She was trying to be really professional, but basically was like, "Okay, like just between
Oh,
moms,
Patty.
you." It was on Kips Lane. It was on Kips Lane, and so like that neighborhood. That she's like, "I really think you should try and look around a bit more before putting in this paperwork." Like that's how she ended up putting it. But I could tell she was like kind of flustered, like, "You have
So
children."
settlement organizations can help with that, and you can find those on 211ontario.ca.
So
They have
they
access.
weren't good for us at all. They were
They didn't
kind of,
help?
everybody was so nice, so unhelpful. Like so polite.
Really?
I really, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that about his
Yeah,
experience.
we didn't like, it wasn't like nothing was terrible or bad, but it was just
Not
ultimately
helpful.
just largely unhelpful. Or like at one point they say they offer free English classes, for example, which sounds great. And Laurent wanted to take, my husband is French speaking, so he wanted to take the English classes so he could like advance further in his career. But
Wow.
he works here. He's got a full-time job. And he can't advance in his job unless he gets English classes. But the hours and stuff they offered were really like hard to get into, and they're all during the workday while you're working.
I
And
wonder
so
now with COVID and things having moved online if they've accelerated their growth plans because I know they were quite lacking technologically and things
yeah,
have changed considerably since COVID. So
I don't
maybe
know.
worth a look
It
at
was pretty
online.
recent. It was this year that he was looking. This school year, he was
This
looking to
this
do
whole
it.
year.
This school year, and there was one that had after school program, like for in the evening, and he was like, "Great." He's like, and so he called up the person. Is like, "I'm really interested in signing up for this. The only thing is, I do work like that at Monday nights, but I could make the other 2 nights in the week. Is it possible if I just come for 2 out of the 3 classes per week?" And
Right.
she gave him a lecture. She's like, "There are people that are begging to get these free classes, and you're not being grateful at all." And like basically, like she was not nice to him. And he was like,
Mm.
"I just like," he's like, "I want to take the
I'm
classes.
just
Like, if
communicating my limitations. Yes.
just, yeah, just to see if there was options to work around it." He wasn't being rude or demanding anything. Just was like, "Is there any other way we could do this? Like, is it fine if I only come the 2 out of 3 days?" And she like let him know that basically immigrants should be grateful they're getting these classes
So
at all.
so settlement organization in that particular scenario didn't work. What did ended up working? Just talking to people and
He never
looking at
got into
ads?
classes. He never got into any of the classes. He tried for
No,
all
no,
of
no.
them, and
I'm
it just
talking about finding a residence for you. What ended up working?
Oh, so when we got here, then we were driving around, and all of like the apartment buildings, they usually have signs up in front with the numbers to call.
Mhm.
So we're calling and asking for availability. Once we saw like what the neighborhood was like, if it was going to be convenient for getting to work and things like that, close enough for the kids to get to a school, and yeah, mostly calling numbers. Facebook, there's a lot of scams on Facebook, but
There
sometimes
is.
you can find good stuff. And same like Kijiji, sometimes you can find some good stuff. You just have to be careful, and that's where it's really helpful to know a Canadian before you come, or to know somebody who lives in Canada already, because you can ask them, like, "Hey, this looks like a great deal. Is this actually a great deal, or are there like red flags here?" And I
There are a
think,
lot of Facebook groups that I saw in researching for the video today that talks about moving to Canada, having been here, and discords and things like that. So I think it's just a matter of a quick search. Again, you may need to go through a couple to see who you can connect with. And I'm always been the kind of person. I mean, like I said, I have my MBA and I specialize in strategy and accounting for a reason because I love numbers
yeah,
and I love strategy. And I'm always of the three. And what I mean by that is I always research 3 things for whatever it is that I am looking for because it gives me a points of reference, hopefully the best, the worst, and in the middle. And then I can apply, my strategic framework to think of what would be the best bet. So that's
oh,
the
that's
other
good.
thing too. I find there's a desperation depending on the countries that people have immigrated from that,
Yes,
oh my God, you are doing me a favor. But remember, at the end of the day, you're exchanging your hard-earned money for
yes,
something that you're looking for. So they're not doing you a favor, you are doing them a favor by
hmm,
renting. So that sense of self-esteem that needs to be a little bit worked on. And I believe a lot of people don't talk about the psychological impact. And mindfulness is a huge part of my life now, having had the kids and gone through everything from mom rage, depression, postpartum, you name it. I've gone through it, and
Yeah.
I've come to the idea that it's really important for you to recognize your feelings and feel them without judgment, and understand that coming from another country, I still remember that day. I still remember
Yeah.
those first, 3, 5 years as an 11-year-old. It was not easy. And that brings me to another matter. Parents get so busy with um, the technical stuff. We got to find a house, we got to find a job. And sometimes I feel like the kids, not that they're ignored, but the impact on them, on the change,
Yes.
is substantial, especially when, we've left our extended families, we left our cousins, we left our schools, and we're kind of left hanging to understand this whole idea of a culture. And we're still trying to figure out life because we're kids.
Right.
So just make sure the lines of communications are open with your kids, and understand that culture here is a lot different, which we can talk about a little bit. But like, I
Yeah.
know, coming from the Middle East, my mom took care of everything. Whereas in North America, kids are taught to be a lot more independent. It's not uncommon for an 11-year-old to be cooking dinner.
Yeah. It's true. That's true. That's true. There's a big push to independence. I have friends that are live in the States or in Canada that are moms that have been there for several generations, and they're like, "How can I get my 4-year-old to be more responsible and to do more by themselves?" Like it's a real discussion.
It is a real discussion. I mean, they're four, but it's
Yeah.
true. My 5-year-old now at 4, she would do her own sunny side egg. It's funny because after 35 years, I would say I've assimilated to be 100% Canadian, but still
Yeah.
have my cultural background, which hasn't been an easy feat to be able to bring in and to keep alive, because I want my kids to know where they came from. I'm proud where I came
Yes.
from, and it's made me the person who I am today. But to that point, be very careful how you see how kids' behaviors change. Don't assume that the behavior is coming from a point of disrespect, or they're trying to question you, or they're trying to take things over, because North America is very individual based. It's a huge shock to parents who come from a culture that's a we based. And I know many cultures outside of Canada are very much, we as a family. I remember, in the first years, I'm like, I don't understand. What do you mean I need this? Like, mom, I need my time. Like in Italy, there is no word for privacy. Like, they don't. What does that mean? Like, do you need a doctor? Like, what does that? What does that mean? Privacy for what? So to understand those subtleties, and make sure you're not getting it from talk shows. I
Just
can't tell you how many discussions I had with my mom. It's like, you cannot go to your friend's house, okay? Okay, I see the Donahue, very bad. I'm like, Mom, what are you watching? Like,
yeah.
my friends are pretty good people. Um, but of course, now in the age of the internet and information, a lot of information is going to come at you very quickly, and your psychological being is going to be critical in you taking on this task. I mean, it's the single most important task of you changing your and uprooting your entire life. And for some people, like for my family, we were very well to do, and to come and get humbled very quickly. Now, it came for a good reason. And now that we're fast forwarding 35 years, what my father has been able to accomplish in one lifetime, they basically grew up in a camp. And now he has 7 kids that are living all around the world, are doing very well with their own families. So he broke extremely many barriers that some people would take, generations to do. So
Yeah.
understand that it's worth it. It's there for a reason. But if you need help emotionally, if you need help psychologically, Canada is very big on mental health. And I think we've done a pretty good job, Patty, of kind of shattering those taboos. And even specifically as well for newcomers, there is a lot of assistance. You just have to ask for it. And that's the other thing too
Yes.
about Canada. Everything is available if you seek it. It's not like in different countries where they're going to come in and yank you out and they will force it. In Canada, that it doesn't work that way. If you don't get it, you will not. If you don't go for it, you will not have
Right, 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 right. Oh, I love that. I love that. I think what you're saying too, and I think you'd agree with this, it's also like really important in those cases too to be really patient with yourself because you're going to say and do dumb things. You're going to say things that you're like, well, that I saw that on so many American TV shows. I thought that's how that was here. You know what I mean? And then surprise, it's not. But other things that you saw on TV and you thought that's got to be fake. They would never know. Then they do that. And so it's you can't always know, even if you do your best to be as informed as possible, you're still going to make mistakes. And I find that
Yep.
in most countries like that I've been to or have lived in, that a lot of what affects how people respond to those mistakes within the community is how humble you are about them. Like people
Yes.
tend to only like you know what I mean, like most people want to help you. Especially in Canada, there's a lot of people that would love to help you. Um, but you do have to be like a little bit nice about like when you make mistakes and stuff like that. I've seen like for example when sometimes when people move to France, that's something I saw with like Americans that had moved to France or Canadians moved to France. Sometimes they would make a mistake and they get embarrassed or there'd be something they don't understand about how it works in France. And then they're like not nice to the people that are living there that are trying to help them. They're like biting the hand that feeds them. You know what I mean? And that doesn't end very well. And then the same thing is moving here, just being open to the fact that it's different. Not what is the expression? Not to ick someone else's yum. People have
Yep.
different tastes and they have different ways of doing things. And I think when I moved to France, I loved so much about it. But there was definitely a period where I hit like a low, and I was like, it's so stupid that they do it this way. This is so stupid. I hate this. And then that doesn't help. That doesn't make it easier.
The judgment, the
It doesn't
judgment
help
has to
you at
be
all.
put aside.
Yeah.
You become a curious child. I think
Yes.
that when you look at kids, it's an excellent way to do it. But at the same time, it breaks my heart when I see newcomers and their sense of self-confidence is it's gone. Their
Oh yeah.
sense of who they are, what they do. Because remember, our culture is, hi, nice to meet you. What do you do? Right? And
Yeah.
that's a culture that can be very difficult on a psyche when, for example, if I'm home and I'm raising my kids, that's very highly looked upon in different culture. That is the
Yes.
epitome of reaching where it's here. You're like, oh, okay. So it's important to know
It's
where you come from, the self-esteem.
yeah.
And I'll share a very simple story. I remember in high school, they'd be like, what do you mean you don't have a boyfriend? I'm like, I don't have a boyfriend. It's
Mhm.
just, yeah, I don't have a boyfriend. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, nothing. But
Yeah.
luckily, because I traveled a lot as a youngster between England and Spain, I saw different cultures. And I
Yeah.
was quite aware, and I had a very good self-esteem and self-confidence. So I would easily say, have you been to Spain? No, I've never left London. I'm like, well, that's sad. I said,
Yeah.
but in Spain, not everybody has a boyfriend when they're 11 or 12. So can you just leave me alone?
Yeah.
Right. But so being able to stand for yourself, and even the language barrier is a huge one. You need to remind yourself you're not learning English because you don't know any language. You're learning English because you're already ahead with one language, two, three, or four. A lot of people who come in here are
Yeah.
advanced in many languages. So really remind yourself. When I say to people, when I was learning English, of course they make fun of me. I said, yeah, but I got three on you. So, and it's just kind of remembering that just because I'm learning language is not a reflection of my intelligence. On the contrary, it's a reflection of my curiosity and me wanting to improve myself. But to do
Yes.
it with kindness, be
Exactly.
gentle with yourself. And again, ask for help and actually do the work.
Yes, definitely be gentle with yourself. Ask for help. I love what you're saying here. I love it so much. And then, like you're saying, with the self confidence, that's something that you do see. Especially there was a guy who was my Uber driver a few weeks ago. Super nice guy, and he was explaining. He's like, I moved here from Syria. There's obviously war and stuff, and it was awful. He's like, but it was so hard because he had been like a top executive in like an oil company that was international, had 30 plus years of experience. And when he moved here, they're like, you're going to have to start over. Like they told him, try applying at Tim Hortons. You know what I mean? And so for him, that was a big blow to his self esteem that he was after 30 years of work, that none of his work experience was going to be taken into account and that he had to start at the bottom of the ladder. And he's like, and it's worth it because of like the future I'm giving my kids and the safety I'm giving
Absolutely.
them, but it doesn't mean that it's not something hard to like accept that like they don't accept any of my previous
But
work
I would say
experience.
I would say that there is a way around that. What ends up happening is there's two thoughts. I'm gonna go for the big guns or I'm not gonna do it at all. That's one. And two, there's this idea of, well, I'm gonna start from Tim Hortons. But here's the thing about Canada. It is experience based. And international experience is very much welcome. But you have to be strategic. I've helped a lot of people who were newcomers it starts with the resume. Not even knowing how the format of the resume of Canada is a huge hindrance to you. That's
Yeah.
one. And two, not working.
Mm.
Let's give this just to think about it logically. If I were to look at LinkedIn and reach out to people, don't you think, I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of people are either first generation or second generation Canadians are more likely willing to help someone else? And there's one thing that I know from my days of the corporate, and you could say I was a networking queen,
Yes.
that it was my favorite thing to do, actually, aside from my job, because I really believe that eagles fly with eagles. And what I mean by that is people who have succeeded want others to succeed with them. They're not afraid of helping you push forward. But again, you
Yeah.
have to present yourself in such a manner that you're not wasting their time. And that takes skill, that takes preparation. Think of it as a degree. So if you are highly skilled, you are needed in Canada, especially now more than ever. I mean, I just read an article yesterday. By 2025, we're going to be welcoming 500,000 new immigrants in Canada because with
Yeah.
the baby boomers and the changes, we have more jobs than we have people to fill. So please don't think that that's where you have to go. It's called, there was a psychological term for it, a survival job. A lot
Mm-mm.
of people who are newcomers come and they seek a survivor job, but they make the number one mistake of staying. You don't have to
Right.
do that.
It can be just like a stepping stone, like something to fill the time while you're like LinkedIn's a great resource. And there's another resource I think you're going to really like that I mentioned here. And ChatGTP can help you make
Oh,
resumes and CVs that are
yes,
incredible, professional, and it'll sound like a native Canadian wrote them. They can do
yes.
them in French and English because I've been talking to ChatGTP in French lately just to see like what the level of French was. It's great. So
There's
they
another
can,
app I have for you. I came across
mm,
yesterday in a video I was watching called Bold Voice, and it
mhm.
basically helps with newcomers learning English with their
Oh,
pronunciation. So
oh,
when
nice.
you're saying words like wound and hound, and there's some nuances in English that even till today my husband still makes fun of me, even though he's also Arabic, but he was born here. But anyway,
Yeah.
we're learning every day. We're learning. 35 years later, I'm still learning. But Bold Voice came across as being a highly recommended app for people.
I'm writing that down so that I can reference it in later videos.
Yeah, you're mentioning it for Laurent, aren't you?
Oh, well, not even for the rocks. I don't know what, but like that's something I want to make a video about some like really good resources for people that maybe don't have access to English classes
Yes.
or just have like very limited time. And I think that would be a great resource. And I've never heard of it, but it sounds fantastic. So I
And
definitely want to
remember
look that
yourself
up.
psychologically. Out of all the languages that I've learned, English was the fastest that I was able to acquire because it actually, when you get down to it, no offense to English, but it's not a very difficult language. It's just a matter of being able to practice it and put yourself in those situations. And I can tell you
Yeah.
from my own experience in watching my father, who was forced to get out, get different jobs, and he knew people, and he knew English before we came to Canada, and he perfected it here, of course. Whereas
Yeah.
my mom, closer community, a lot of her Arabic friends didn't really venture, eventually with like our neighbors. And then she picked up English as we were doing more renovations in the house and so on and so forth, that she finally picked it up. But it was a lot more delayed for her until she ended up going to school when we were a little bit older. So again, get comfortable enough that psychologically your basic needs are met, but not so comfortable that you're not growing. And one of the things I put in the goal in the video I launched yesterday was write down a plan. Right? If you write it, it will happen. I almost guarantee it. Why? Because the second it's in your hand as a pen and you write it on a piece of paper, it becomes imprinted psychologically. Where do you want to see yourself in 6 months? Where do you want to see yourself in a year? And remember, some people are coming from countries that they are experiencing things like post-traumatic, or they haven't experienced it and they will now. But if you write it down, it can guide you through some dark times, which I hope no one will see. But in the case that you do, where do you see your children? We came, like I said, there's 7 of us. We ended up doing post-secondary education, all of us, and being able to kind of, they helped us launch to an entire new lifestyle because of their decisions. Was it easy? No. Were they able to afford to send us all to school and pay for it? Hell no. Right?
Yeah.
But we were able to get loans, which brings me to the next point of the financial aspects of coming.
Yes.
Canada is expensive. Life is great here, but it is expensive.
And
Sometimes
even
I
more,
look at my husband, I'm like, go ahead.
I said, and even more so now with inflation. Inflation has just been,
It's been highest than it's been in about 40
yeah,
years, but it also has some incredible opportunities. Where the market is right now, I can tell you, we may not see an opportunity like this ever again. One thing I know I would have wished that my parents had done, because they came with a lot of savings, a lot of capital, is invest. And the idea of a passive income. Some newcomers rely on previous experience of their families who are well to do, and they'll say, listen, before you even think about renting, think about putting a down payment, say on a plaza or on an apartment or a condo, so that you can create what we call as passive income. And passive income is essentially defined as you making income doing nothing, which is basically right now every Canadian's dream.
yes. Oh, we have to do the disclaimer though, because anytime you talk about finances, you have to do a disclaimer, especially in Canada. So like
Absolutely.
I am not a financial expert. and and anything we say in this video is just like two girlfriends talking with you over a cup of coffee, right?
This is
That's the
completely our
level of
personal
seriousness.
opinions.
It's just our personal opinions. We're not saying you need to do this or you should do this. These are just things that, like, hopefully we can tell you things that we wish we'd done or that we wish we'd known beforehand. And then
Absolutely.
you can look these up for yourself and see which advice will apply to your situation in life. And if things like don't apply or you look it up and you're like, not for me, that's excellent too. Just, yes, we're just trying to
Yes,
be,
any advice provided in this video is for entertainment purposes
yes,
only. We
entertainment
highly,
only.
highly advise that you seek professional advice for anything that pertains your financial, psychological, and any of your well-being. But we are
Yes.
welcome to have this chat and to share kind of our experiences as to what we've seen. So when it comes to things like investing, that's given such, it's a very low priority when somebody's coming at a newcomer, because again, your senses are heightened, your basics, your triangle of needs is very specific. You need your food,
Yeah.
you need your shelter, you need your education, and that's where all the focus is at. But when you can sit down and have a plan and say, you know what, I want
Yeah.
to be able to do this. And the beautiful thing is about being a newcomer is you have a chance at a brand clean slate. Let's
Yes.
say things were not very good where you came from. So what? It's gone. And the beautiful thing about Canada is the sky is the limit. I'll tell you the second, and I mean the second I realized how incredible Canada is. I was in grade 8. I was reading, I think The Hobbit. Had no idea. I thought my English was so bad, couldn't get through the book until my teacher then finally kind of communicated to me that it's in a whole new language anyway. I'm like, oh my God. So finally I read it. I took the dictionary, I'm slugging through, and I was like, this is amazing. And I go, okay, I'm ready. And she's like, and she looks at me and I'm like, any page, I had a photographic memory. I'd be like, I got this. And then she goes, what do you think? And I kind of blanked out. I look down and I'm thinking, what you think is not in any of the pages that I recall. And
Yeah.
she's like, I'm like, aren't you going to ask me like what happened and who did what and where? Because I got it. I got it. That's where our schooling was very, very strict. She's
Hmm.
like, no, I can read the book. What do you think? And I blanked. Not very often, I don't have words to say, but for a good 5 minutes, I was silent because I've
Hmm.
never, as a 12-year-old, ever been asked what I think. And then I realized that's why my father chose Canada, because I have the opportunity to not only acquire information, but assimilate new knowledge and share it. And
Yeah.
it is, I know it sounds simple, but it's so powerful, you guys. It's so powerful. So put a plan together, get some help, start connections. For example, when you open a bank account, ask for a financial advisor. Um, Educate yourself. Don't assume that they're just going to push the information on you. It does seem daunting at first, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you from personal experience, it pays in loads, and even on your psychological well-being. For me to know my kids are taken care of when it comes to their education, we're good. We're good. The
Yeah.
inflation can go a little bit higher. I know the strategies that I can put in place. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying, it's so affluent and the wealth is up to the kazoo, but you also don't need as much as you think you need. And the only way for you to become to believe that is to have a plan together and put numbers and ideologies and to understand, well, what is it that you're trying to save for and why? If I give you 5 million, why does 5 million make you feel safe? Why 7 million? Why 2 million? And a lot of people psychologically think, oh, if I just had a million. Okay. If you just had a million, what? how will that change your psychology? So working on the mindfulness, working on the psychology, working on gratitude, contentment, and accepting abundance is actually the key to receiving.
But that reminds me of something I did want to talk about really fast about credit cards, because a lot of countries don't have credit cards. And if you don't know how to use them, it can be extremely predatory. Like it can be you can very quickly get into a lot of trouble financially with credit cards if you don't know what you're doing, if it's new. Like, oh, even if you're pretty good at math or you're pretty good at numbers, it can be a quick slippery slope. So it's really important that you look up a few videos about how credit cards function. Do you have one on your channel about how like credit cards work?
So I have one about the true cost of a credit card. There was a
Okay.
person who sent me, and they said they have a $2,380 balance owing on it, and they were paying about $40 a month. It sounds great, right?
Yeah.
Well, made the calculation. It would take her 17 years to pay that off, and that's
Yeah. No,
only
it's insane.
2,300. I can't even imagine any other credit. The thing about Canada is we're very credit based,
Yeah.
and because you don't see the money in your hand, you'll see a lot of people go extremes. They'll say, nope, I'm not going to do a bank account. Because remember, people are coming from countries that they can't trust their governments or their
Yeah.
financial systems. And it's important to note that in Canada, there are some safety places put in place. Again, do your homework when you open your bank account,
Mhm.
ask about that. They'll tell you about the CDIC, because I know, in places, for example, right now in Lebanon, it's hell on earth. People can't even access their money. We're talking
Oh,
professionals who live in Germany and all around the world, $500,000 that's worth nothing. They can't even access it. Um,
yeah, it's
it's a
bad.
very, very sad story. So make sure that you understand. But credit in Canada right now, a lot of companies, unfortunately, are pushing the buy now and pay later. But the joke in the financial world is buy now, pay never. Um, I don't know. I think you have to have a pretty strong psychological mindset to be able to carry a debt that you can't handle. I, for one, I'm not one to do that. It's
Yeah.
very simple. If I can't afford it, I don't buy it. Having
Right.
said that, I'm very strategic, and when I use my credit card, I would be silly not to use a credit card. For example, right now here in Ontario, one of the greatest things to use is the Shoppers Drug Mart Optimum points. And I have a special credit card, the PC Financial. There are 3 tiers, and I get points back to me in dollar value once I fill my gas, I buy my
Yes.
groceries, and I make, bigger purchases. So my daughter, for example, had an orthodontist appointment. It was for the low price of $3,600. I would never pay that cash. I put that on the credit card. I pay in full in a
Hmm.
month. If I have the benefits or so forth, you can use those options, but I do it for collecting the points. And then you can either bank those points. A lot of people do that so that by the time they're at Christmas, their meals is completely and their presents are taken care of. And Patty, you can talk about that because you used that this
Yeah.
year.
So what I did, so there is different credit cards have different like advantages and things like that. And with the PC Optimum credit card, you also can accumulate points if you buy certain things in the store. So we tried to like calculate all of our groceries so we were getting a maximum amount of points, and we actually were able to use the points that we got from this card to buy a Nintendo Switch for our kids. We wouldn't have been able to afford it for Christmas for them otherwise, but we were able to get them the Nintendo Switch for free. But our thing with credit cards, and it's what if you were my buddy and you were moving to Canada to the US and you'd never used a credit card before, my like advice to you as my buddy, this is the disclaimer for financial advice, right? Um, would be to only spend money that you already have in your bank account on the credit card. Just use a credit card, get points, and to pay it back immediately. Especially when you're new and you're trying to figure everything out, what happens to a lot of times, and what's happened to a lot of my friends who started credit cards like 18, 19, they're like, well, I'd like to buy like, just a couple extra outfits this month, but I'll pay it back next month. I'll let the balance hang and I'll just pay it back next month. But the next month, you get sick and you miss a few days at work. And so you can't actually pay that back. But also now you need to add on some groceries onto your credit card. And it can accumulate bit by bit by bit until you are thousands of dollars in debt without ever having gone and done any crazy spending. So it's really, until you kind of get a feel for it, definitely I would only spend money that I had on my credit card that I could reimburse pretty much immediately or within the next few days. Just when you're first starting out and trying to figure it out if you've never experienced credit cards before, because man, I we had there's somebody from my hometown that was like, "You know what? We deserve a prettier house. We deserve like to have these renovations done. And instead of, they tried to take out a loan with their bank, and their bank was like, no, you don't qualify for one. And so instead, they took out 4 credit cards, and they maxed each of the credit cards out, and they have over $100,000 in debt on their credit cards, so they could have this beautiful dream house they wanted. And they have the dream house, but now they're pretty much in poverty because they can't afford anything. All of their extra money every single month goes to paying back these credit cards. And I don't know what they're probably going to have to declare bankruptcy. Like, I don't know how they're going to get out of it. And people
Now,
get
when you
themselves in these situations. It's not good.
it's important to kind of mention as well that when you first start with the credit cards, you may not be able to qualify for the credit cards that has the points that we're
Yeah.
necessarily talking about. But the
Hmm.
Optimum card is a bit unique because the Optimum points itself is a separate card than a credit
Yes.
card. You can just maximize if you get that credit card. So I just want to make that disclaimer.
Yeah. You can
And to
have
build your
non-credit
credit,
card
you can
charges.
start with a, go ahead.
Yeah, you can have a card that's not a credit card, but still gets you
Correct.
points. Yeah.
And I highly recommend that. And another way to build your credit pretty quickly is to start with a secured credit card, meaning you, if let's say you have
Ooh,
$500, your limit is only a 500. The other way too, that
advice.
to wrap up the discussion about credit is, let's say you know family who've been here, and a lot of people that are newcomers, they're here because somebody else has been here. I would say
Mm,
the majority, or they know someone here. Not everyone, but some. What you could also do is tag along their credit, as long as they agree, where you get added as an authorized user with a credit card. You may not even have to actually use that card, but in being listed as an authorized user, and by the way, that's a trick for you to be able to do with your children so that they can start off with a perfect credit when they're
yeah.
18 years old and they're trying now to secure a car loan, a mortgage, or a rental or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That way, it just gives them a bit of a leg up. And then teaching your kids financial literacy, well, it's at the heart of what I do. So, and what I believe in. My
Yeah.
kids have learned about money since they were probably 5 years old. They can understand the concept.
Yeah.
And then going back to the groceries and shopping, Canada has a wonderful ability for price matching. You just have to know where to look for it. Again, a lot
Okay.
of the newcomers believe you can go in a store and you have to pay what's available, and that's it, no questions asked. But our varieties here are amazing.
I had no idea what price matching was when I moved to Canada. So I'll explain in one sentence what I think it is. And then if you have anything to add, do you want to do that?
Sure.
Okay. So price matching, you have apps in Canada. I was going to take out my phone, but I'm talking on my phone. You have apps in Canada like Flip, and like there's another one I forgot what it's called. But you're going to look at flyers of the week, and on your phone you can like highlight the good prices at the different stores. And certain stores, for example, the one that's closest to our neighborhood is No Frills. No Frills is one of the stores that price matches. Not all stores price match, but what if they do? That means you can go into their store, you get all the stuff that's on sale at No Frills, but you can also find all the stuff that's on sale at Walmart in the North No Frills stores. And if you take it up and you're saying, hey, these strawberries are on sale for $1.88 at Walmart, here's the proof on my phone, they will reduce the price and you'll only pay what Walmart is charging.
Yes.
Um, there are
The
like
disclaimer is it has to
conditions,
be,
but
for example, if there's strawberries made in Mexico, it has to be, the comparison has to be equivalent. It
yeah,
can't be made from anywhere else. If the apples are Ontario, then there has to be the same product, not necessarily the same brand, but it has to be made in the same. So they have a little bit of nuances. Where I
yeah,
really do well in this category is shopping for meat, especially right now with the inflation being as high as it is. But
yeah,
I am still on target on what we plan. I don't believe in budgeting, as you know, Patty, but I believe in the mindful spending. And I guess some people would call it like the split budgeting idea, where
yeah,
I won't pay for parking, but if there's a trip coming up, I will spend whatever I need to on that particular trip because I
right.
plan accordingly. But remember what your values are. And I think when you remember what your values are, you go back to your plan, you see it visually, you share it with your spouse so that you're on the same page, explain it to your kids. And one thing, going back to being a newcomer, I wish my parents had that talk about how hard they were having it. I remember coming home one day, seeing the look on my dad's face. I'm like, something is very wrong. It was third year university, and he was almost in a panic. He's like, we have a second mortgage on the house, and I don't know if we can buy bread next week. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? What? 5 years ago, I had a Rolex just for fun. But it was, remember, it has to do with ego. It has to do with self-esteem. He
Mm,
didn't feel comfortable sharing that information, realizing there were so many expenses in Canada, so many oil changes and tires and right. And with it being winter, your maintenance levels are
Oh
through the
yeah.
roof and maintaining a home and so on and so forth. And that's all new. And managing a family and managing, in his case, a wife. And he was traveling. Like it was no short of a miracle what this man has been able to accomplish. But be honest with your kid because you'd be surprised how much that they will actually help you and then communicate. We don't need as much as you think we do. We just need to know what's going on so that we can understand and not think it's our fault as children.
Yeah,
And
it's more
luckily,
they
we
know.
were able to come together as a family and we moved on from there. And actually, it was the reason that I ended up going into business and realizing how easier it came to me. But it's those through life struggles that you learn. But include your family, be open in your discussions, um, and just be honest.
Yeah, I think what you're saying too reminds me of it. We have an expression in English that's like keeping up with the Joneses, which means you see other people around you that like they all have two cars and they all have the house with the big lawn and they all have this and they all have that. And you really want like to get to that lifestyle sometimes. And what a lot of people, but sometimes you put the cart before your horses. What's the expression? I don't even remember. But you
Cart
get ahead of
before the
yourself
horse.
before you can, yeah, before you're ready to really invest those things before you can afford to. And if you get them too early, you can get into debt. Like I know a person here who they have a joint income household. They make over 100K a year and they are struggling every month because they needed the two new fancy cars and they needed this and it's just they have enough money that had they spent their money more wisely and like had been more prudent, they should be large at the end of every month. They should have extra
Yeah.
money. But because of the way they did it and now it's they're in those loans, they're a little bit stuck. But
So
because
two
they really
things.
want that lifestyle, they but if they'd gone cheap, the thing that they realize now is that had they gone cheaper in the beginning and just gotten the cheaper cars to start with, they probably could afford that higher lifestyle now. But now they're in like over their head with interest rates that are keep rising, variable interest rates on a lot of loans, and
Yes.
it's not great. You can
You're
be
reminding
making
me of two important concepts. I've
yeah.
worked in the bank as a small business advisor, and I have the privilege of seeing a lot of people's bank accounts
Mm.
and comparing it to their regular lifestyle. Here
Oh
is a
yeah.
little insider secret. The Smiths, the Joneses, they're broke. They just live a lifestyle where they're making everybody else rich by spending on their credit cards, but they're making themselves very poor. I don't know. Sometimes I think it takes a lot more psychological strength that I have. I just don't have it in me to live beyond my means. My anxiety goes through the roof. I get anxious. I get almost nauseous and sick to my stomach. But
Yeah.
I've learned through the years, credit has its place. If we don't know how to use credit, I would never be able to afford my home, right?
Right.
So there is such a thing as good credit, and there's such a thing as bad credit. You talked about something that's pretty important, which is the cars. What people don't understand is your car and any loan you have towards your car, it's a negative credit. Why? Because it's not generating you any value. It's
Yeah.
depreciating. Unless you're using a car, for example, for a business where it generates income,
Yeah.
don't put a lot of value in it. As long as it's got four wheels and it works. And again, if you're going to make that decision, make it consciously. Understand if you
Yeah.
can meet the stress and the anxiety that comes with it, please go right ahead. No one,
Mhm.
I'm not saying you should deny yourself anything, but if you find yourself doing it because I want so and so or I want to compare to so and so,
Yeah.
then you
That's the
need to really second guess because it's just not worth living that way.
No, no, no. It's one thing if there's certain things that really truly bring you joy and you work for them and that type of thing. But the idea of like keeping up with the Joneses or like, oh, we want to look like we have as much money as everyone else in this neighborhood. And it's like you don't know what their bank account looks like. The other people in the neighborhood. You gotta be really careful. You gotta be really careful. Sometimes too, like you kind of feel like, but we deserve to have two cars. Like, but you kind of gotta rein that in, check is this like ego or is this really a need and try and figure out how to live within your means so that later on you will have the means to like accomplish these dreams and such,
Well, I've
but
always
it's a slippery slope.
I've always thought it was very, very, very interesting. Like I said, I've had a unique upbringing. The
Yeah.
position that my father was in, we were able to travel to Spain. A lot of the times we were there, we were at the estate of his boss that was in the multi millions. I mean, we traveled so much, I actually thought my dad owned the airport. It was pretty funny when I went there the first time and by myself realizing, oh, I'm a normal person. Well, great. And there's one thing that I realized is they were always empty. And it's interesting having been around people who've been extremely wealthy, and I'm talking beyond just normal wealth. It's like everybody's trying to be so wealthy to do nothing, and to do nothing and say sit on a beach where honestly cost you nothing. So it's interesting when you look at the psychological, you're like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish in the wealth? Is it safety? Well, safety from what? Because if we're looking at the financial institutions and if things were to, everybody talks about, we can move into now investing, for example. Oh, investing is risky. Really? Well, so is having cash in your money. And if it's devalued, they'll tell you something. It's not worth anything. But
Yeah.
as investing at least gives you the chance and the opportunity for that money to be, working for you. The greatest
Right.
thing I heard recently was the greatest thing that you can do is life is end up with $0 in your bank account. That is a life that's fully fulfilled, where every one of your dollars has been allocated to whatever that you've decided for. And that stuck with me.
Yeah. You've got to find that balance between like enjoying your life and then also living within your means and spending prudently. But like, I want to be rich someday. that's,
And
that's
that's
the security
fine. And
aspect.
it's not, but the rich for what purpose, right? Like, is it the zeros that gives the comfort, or is it the what you're trying to have that? For example, like I believe in the idea of taking mini retirements. I've done it where I've liquidated all my assets, I have the cash, or I have it in one bank account, and I lived in Spain for about 8 months. I was in my 20s. Then I came back and I ended up doing my master's, and then I was in corporate with GE, and then with GE real estate, I had two roles there. And then I took a bit of a break. I took a 9-month break, took belly dancing, and then came back and started with TV. And it was just natural to me to be able. I don't understand the idea of waiting till I'm 65. Well, how am I supposed to know I'm supposed to be in that good health? How am I supposed to I'm going to make it that
You
far?
don't know.
So
You don't
for
know.
me, it was I learned very quickly through my family, through the way we grew up, is life comes first, period. And it's very finite in what you're able to do. So there is that extreme of people say, oh, I'm going to deny myself everything. And when I have X, I will be able to travel and do this. And there's the extreme that says, I don't care about tomorrow. I don't care about 15 years. I'm going to spend everything in myself. And I believe that
Yeah.
there's a balance in between.
Yeah.
Again, write it down. Why do you want to be wealthy? What does wealthy mean to you? What is it about it that's attractive?
So I do have one thing that's a little off topic, but I don't want to forget because it was on my list of points that I
Of
wanted to
course.
hit today. And one of them is to like know what your workers' rights are. So I talked about earlier about knowing like
Yes.
basic rental rights because there are a lot of rent people that rent out in Canada that take advantage of immigrants. There are a lot of employers that have no shame in like really screwing you over too. So be careful. So yeah,
Especially
they
labor
believe that
labor
you don't
level
know the law
jobs.
or your rights, and so they will take advantage of that. So there's quite a few things, just basic workers' rights. Again, Canada.gov or what is it? Is it Canada.ca or Canada.gov?
Canada.ca is the overall governing, and it
Yeah,
has labor, taxes, newcomers, anything you can ever think of.
yeah, just having like a basic idea of your rights. And if you're ever feeling a little bit exploited, look into it. See if that is something that's illegal or not. There might be some things you missed or you weren't aware of. But there are also it's really hard, right? It's really hard because
But
sometimes
remember, even if they know that they're being, and we know a lot of newcomers that know that they're being exploited, but there is that fear. Well, if I leave this job now, I'm not going to be able to put food on my kids' table. And understand that
right,
there's a lot of benefits in Canada available. I always say no one in Canada goes hungry. You may be uncomfortable, but you will not be going hungry or starving. And yes, we have some poverty levels, and yes, we have a lot of issues, but there are many, 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 many benefits and agencies out there to help. And if that means you need to find another job, but that comes back to the earlier point that I made of never, ever stop networking. I don't care if you're in your dream job, in your dream home, in your dream car, with your dream spouses and your dream kids, keep networking because that is the key to kind of propelling your life forward. And then also, having said that, get to the point where you now start to give back. Reach out to people who are newcomers and don't just communicate the negative. I find that happening as well as a lot. Oh, we came to Canada. Oh, but there must be something good because you're still here.
right.
So just remember, being content, being grateful, and focusing on the two things. And again, get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Something I've noticed too about like when it comes to immigration and people like leaving different countries and stuff, a lot of times we talk about like you're saying the negative and such. And I think it's really important to recognize that no matter what country you move to, there will be problems. There will be
Yes.
things you don't like. Or and sometimes different people have different opinions about what the problem is. Like there's something that maybe I love about Canada and you're like, Patty, that
Not so
sucks.
much.
I hate that. You know what I mean? Like not so much. It's okay to have different opinions. So there's no country that's going to be a perfect country. They're all going to have problems.
Exactly.
A
And
lot of
remember, there are things within your control and things like I hear so many people complain about, oh, our taxes. Yes, but do you know how many avenues we have to reducing tax? That's one. And two, do you know where your taxes go? Do you know why we have higher taxes and why we're able to do the things that we do? For example, a lot of newcomers don't know we have basically 13 different healthcare systems because every province in Canada manages their own healthcare on a provincial
yeah,
level, right? One tip I mentioned in yesterday's video was sometimes you have to wait 3 months before you qualify for medical services in Canada. Well, if you do that, you need to do your homework so that you have extended health coverage because chances are if your body is getting introduced to a different temperature, you're probably going to get a cold or get ill or whatever it may need. You may need some services for. So, planning ahead, know the information. And when it comes to the taxes, I know it's scary. I know, it was like it's like brain surgery, but even brain surgeons say it's brain surgery until you do it once. So be curious, keep asking the questions. And if the person in front of you isn't answering, go ahead and ask someone else. But try to feed your soul to be in a place that you can be curious and accepting of new information because it's very easy, I find, in Canada. And this happened to us right away. You fall into a rut, right? You got to
mhm,
work to pay the bills. You got to pay the bills. The bills keep coming, whether you like it or not. You got to keep working. And all of a sudden you look up, how did 10 years pass by? And I hate to say it, but that has been at least my experience in Canada. It's almost like time here is accelerated and we live to work as opposed to work to live. But
yeah,
I'm also sensing that there's been a shift in that ideology. COVID definitely helped because
for
people
sure.
are just getting tired. The millennial kids who are millennials, they're now very much more selective when it comes to their jobs. So again, that brings us back to, being open with your children. A lot of issues come up here in Canada you'd never hear in a different part of the world, whether it has to be with gender, finances, independence, their access to their friends, different cultures. So there is a lot for newcomers to consider. But again, I really sit down and even part of your plan, what do you want your kids to learn as far as values, money, financial literacy? Um, and I mean, everything is out there. You just have to kind of break it out and seek it as the time comes for.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize too, like we're talking about things like, oh, just like, pull on through. But like it is also like it's okay to like we were saying earlier also to like make mistakes and to be tired. It's okay to be like because immigrating, it's exhausting. There's so much mental labor that
If
goes
you're
in there.
not, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, it's or you're lucky. Some people are
Oh,
just
you're very lucky.
sometimes I see like these things when I was looking for like immigration stuff, I was like, if I had like tens of thousands of dollars just lying around to pay to like have somebody do all this for me, it would be a lot easier. So like it's
But like
all
you said, they may be limited as well. And that brings me to another point. Just because advice comes from someone who's quote unquote is communicating themselves as to be a professional, one thing that I have noticed in Canada is what I call very tunnel. So if somebody is an expert in one thing, that's it. They're only an expert in that field. So if you go
okay,
to an eye doctor and you say, I've been experiencing some heart palpitations. No, sorry, I don't do the heart. I'm just an
right.
eye doctor. And that's an ID, and that's a kind of a mindset here that I find in Canada that having lived in different places, they
Okay.
would comment on different areas, whereas in here, it's very
Very
much about
generic.
quote unquote staying in your lane.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's going to
Oh,
get
that's
very
funny.
frustrating for newcomers because I know as a Palestinian, as someone Arabic from the Middle East, we are taught to think 360 and we connect different areas, different ideologies, different thought processes. Whereas in Canada, I find it's very
Well, that's
myopic,
an interesting
I guess is
perspective
the
because
word.
see, that's normal for me. Having grown up in America, that was like that was very normal. So I
And that's
never
very
thought.
North American is exactly my point where
Yeah.
you're like, well, what do you mean? If I'm talking to you about a car, why can't you tell me about, the next level? Oh, no, 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 that's the higher end car and you have to pass through this door and they'll know about it, but I don't know
Okay.
anything. And I'm like, okay,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
So
No,
it
that's
takes a
something
bit of
too
getting
that
used to.
surprised me. I never thought of that. I'd never thought of that before. Oh, that's really interesting. I was check my notes really fast, see if there's any major points. Okay.
Medical services is something we haven't really touched on yet, but I would say, as I alluded to earlier, make sure that you have extended health benefit if you're in a province that you have to wait 3 months. Understand the healthcare
So
system here in
legally,
Canada that we
we weren't
have.
allowed to come to Canada unless we had that. We had to prove we had it before coming to Canada.
But even just knowing where like I remember there was an incident, my mom didn't even know where the emergency room was. She just didn't, it wasn't thought
Yeah.
about. With the 7 kids and my sister like broke her wrist or something. And it
Mhm.
took a couple of days, even though it was about, 5 minutes away from us, but the woman didn't know. My dad was
Yeah.
traveling for work at that particular time. So
Knowing what to do in
knowing, for
case of
example, how our
emergency.
walk-in system works, how you book an appointment, knowing your area, finding a family doctor, finding a dentist, things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot to handle, and like it's just it feels like information overload. But once you get the system set up and in place, things are going to run smoothly like they did in your home country. But it's just that time, right? Like when I first moved to France, I remember sometimes I felt like a little child because I was like, there are 10-year-olds who know more about how this system is supposed to be working than I do. Like I'm like really starting over and I have no reference from like, oh, I heard my parents talking about it when I was younger, so I know what to do. No, I didn't have any of that. So
It's a very
that's something
humbling experience. It
it's
really
really
is
humbling.
because
Yeah.
everything you've built has been almost wiped out. And now someone is saying, okay, here you go. We've given you the pleasure of coming to our country and now you need to assimilate. Luckily,
Mhm.
I find Canada is less so than the States in that we take pride in
Yes.
people taking pride in their culture. Whereas in the States, it's like, nope, welcome to America.
So
Here we do it this way.
when I was a teenager and I came to visit Canada, in the US, in our history classes, they talk about a melting pot of immigrants. Like, so
Yes.
everybody comes in and you all become kind of like assimilated to be the same, the melting pot. And in Canada, my Canadian, I'm pretty sure with my cousin was like, no, in Canada, we are not a melting pot. We are a mosaic. And like,
We
she,
are
and
Mosaic.
I was like, that is so poetic. I love that. That's beautiful. I love mosaics.
There's
I
a
think
lot
they're
of arguments
one of my
to
favorite art forms.
both sides of that story
Oh,
because
for
I
sure.
think by nature, when you're here for 35 years, I can't say but you help have some kind of a melting, but you end
There
up
is.
gelling different cultures. One thing we didn't talk about was understanding when it comes to the financial structure, knowing the different accounts you have for retirement and for investing.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you and I can make a completely other podcast on this subject, but to say it very quickly, you need a bank account, you need a credit card. To me, that's an absolute minimum. You also, once you're a Canadian citizen and you're over 18, you have access to what's called a tax-free savings account. Tax-free. And I know everybody and their second cousin tells you should have an emergency fund and sitting in a savings account. And again, in my humble opinion, I am not a financial advisor. I do not have a savings account, but I do have a tax-free saving account where I'm able to pull out money tax-free. And I could have some cash in there, but I end up investing it because I like to allocate a job to every single one of my dollars. So tax-free savings account, you also have what's called a registered retirement savings account, and that is
Mhm.
for you to retire. The point of it is that you don't access it till 65. I'm of the opinion that I like to maximize my tax-free savings account first because it's actually post-tax money. So I've already paid tax on that money before I invest it. But
Yeah.
even if that money goes to $1 million, $2 million, I don't have to pay tax on it from that. The RRSP is very limiting. You have access to it when you're buying your first home. The RRSP to me makes sense when you have an employer contributing into that plan. So for me, I would maximize my TFSA and then I would do my RRSP. Of course, when I started, I ended up doing the reverse because, well, I didn't know. And secondly, I had jobs that my employers were
Right.
contributing into my registered retirement saving plan. Another
I,
one that a lot of newcomers don't know about is their registered education saving plan for their children. This is a great one because whatever you put in, there's a max, I believe, of 2,500. The government matches your contribution up to 20%. So again, ask your bank, ask the questions, but the difficulty, and God knows I know this, I've traveled enough to know, it's knowing the right questions to ask to the right person in Canada to get the right answer. And I've
right.
always been frustrated with professionals
Yeah.
because you have to come up with the questions. And a lot of the things that I've acquired knowledge wise has just been situations where I've had to dig deep. I mean, I guess you can call me a nerd, but I read the CRA papers for fun. And because I do that, I've been able to learn a lot of things. And in one scenario, because I'm a caregiver for my parents, I was able to get back about $12,000. I have a video on that by declaring the caregiver benefits. And if you have children who have health issues, you have benefits like the disability tax credit. They don't just have to be children, but I'm saying there's a lot of tax benefits that are available. So if you have a family and you're a Canadian citizen and someone in your family is ill, you can declare a caregiver, the Canada caregiver amount, the disability tax credit, which by itself reduces your tax credit obligation. You also have benefits or monthly payments that are made to you if you have children who have a physical or mental impairment, and you'll be able to get monthly subsidies to that. You also would get
Yeah.
the CCB, the Canadian Child Benefit. So again, Canada has a lot of benefits and social assistances, and I do think that's why people end up choosing Canada to come home.
Yes. So like the retirement in general, I just want to touch on that 'cause, like Laurent had never he's like, why would you invest for retirement? That was not a thing he'd like ever heard of. Like, cause do you just expect the government to pay for your retirement? Like you'll
You
make
made a
enough
video
with
on
the
that, I
retirement.
believe, recently, correct?
Yes, I did a video of that on my French channel recently. So it's just important to know that in general in Canada, you need in the Canada or in the US, if you move there, you need to look up how to prepare for retirement because it's not like it is in some other countries. It might be very, very different as far as investing in the stock market and things like that. Where I was like, That's regular people don't do that." And I was like, "Yeah, in the US, regular people do, and if they don't, they end up like some family members of mine with lots of regrets because you can't with how much people make nowadays, like the average wage and stuff, you can't just save money for retirement and have enough to be able to live on and pay your end of life expenses. It's almost impossible unless you're making like $1 million a year. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Well,
so
you bring up a good point, and I meant to say this earlier. Please know something. I have been around people who have made 50,000, and been around people who've made 300,000. It is not how much you make. It is how much you keep. Because what ends up happening is that it's called the lifestyle creep. There's some people who are, it's called FIRE, so financial independence, early retirement, and retire early, pardon me, that's FIRE. Financial independence, retire early. And what they do is they live at a certain lifestyle. Say they make 90,000 and their expenses match that. They don't upgrade their cars, they don't upgrade their homes, but their salaries go up. And what they end up doing is they banking the difference. When the people do that, they end up having a very comfortable retirement and life savings. And I'm like, when it comes to investing, just choose index funds. Choose the basket of the top 500 companies. Right now, the VFV in Canada is one that's been highly recommended. In the States is the VOO. You set it and you forget it. And I can tell
entertainment
you,
purposes only.
and this is completely for entertainment purposes
Yes,
only. I'm just saying it from personal experience. Look into it and study it and do your homework. Don't ever do, the blind eye. And I did because, Nasreen and Patty told me. Well,
yeah,
that's just
don't do
silly.
that.
You have to understand the risks because there's always risks to anything that you do. Because I have my free time at 2 o'clock in the morning, I've even started trading and investing and doing options trading. So when I say I've done it all, I've done it all, and I've
Mhm.
lost a lot of money and I've made a lot of money, and that's a whole other discussion as to what it is. But I can tell you, the more boring the process is, the more successful we'll be in the long term. And the stock market is the only one that, if you looked at it in the last 100 years, it's always gone up. And yet 85% of people ended up losing their money. Why? Because of psychology. So that's what my channel is about. I talk about how to make money, and I'm still developing it and seeing kind of where it's going to go. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that. One big thing for me is like a lot of stuff that I'm sharing on my channel. I often will tell people like, don't believe anything I say. Verify all by yourself. Like I hope it's just opening discussions and opening up thinking like, why would she say that? And they'll go and look it up and stuff like that. I think that's for whatever because I switch topics quite a bit on my
Well,
channel. But
remember our
whatever,
goal. Let's go back to where our goal is for,
yeah,
I think, both of our channels, and it is to open your eyes to something that you may not have been that you've just hasn't been on your radar, right? We get so
Right.
busy and get so myopic, and we get so weighed down with our particular emotions, unless you are, somebody peeks a door open and says, look here. But we know what happens when you just believe blindly. Sometimes if
Right.
you're lucky, it will work out for you, but more often than not, it gets you in a lot more
I
trouble.
get you in a lot of
Never
trouble.
do
I can
something
see.
when you don't understand what it is. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me. They said, no, 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 you take care of it at the bank. Let's say it's a loan,
Yeah.
whatever it is that they needed from my services. No, 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 we trust you. And I'm like, I know I'm trustworthy, but you still don't understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this loan structure versus that. You don't know
Yeah.
what an amortization is, do you?
Yeah.
Right? And I feel horrible, but it comes back to that sense of like, well, like I should have, but I didn't. I know I was embarrassed. I'm like, be embarrassed, but don't ever be caught to a point where you end up being sued for something because you didn't know when you signed up for it. And that's the thing
Yeah.
in Canada. If you sign for something, you are on the hook. So
Yes.
understand what you're reading, take your time. And if they're not answering you in a good way, go to someone else. Go to
Yeah, and
someone
always,
else.
even if they're like, you can always, even if it sounds great and everything sounds perfect, like there nothing, it does not hurt to get a second opinion. If you have friends that are in Canada already, be like, hey, so this is what the bank offered me. Like, what do you think of this? And a lot of times, people that have been here longer will be like, oh, I did that. It sucked. This is what I recommend instead. And you can get several different opinions,
Yep.
or maybe it's a great deal. And it doesn't hurt to ever get second opinions.
So
Oh, I have
again,
one more
it's
thing. Oh, sorry, really
I was
fast. That
going to
reminds
say
me.
it's just one more point to your point. A lot
Yeah.
of people, when they come to different cultures, for example, people who work in banks from different countries in the world are held in an extremely high esteem, where psychologically you're not supposed to be questioning that person. It's almost disrespectful. Where
Oh,
I'm telling you in Canada, that's not in the case. I believe in Canada, we are in service of for you. You are the
yeah.
customer, you are in charge, and you have choices. So maybe in some countries you can go to one place and you have to beg and plead for them to say, give you a loan. I don't believe that's the case here. Of
Right.
course, it's not going to be as easy as walking in. I'm not trying to say that it's a piece of cake. Otherwise, every newcomer would never have an issue. But what I'm saying is you always have a choice. You just need to step back, take your information. If you need to take a few minutes or days or weeks, then do so. If you ever feel pressured, just stop. There's
Yeah.
no reason for you to feel pressured unless something is else going on that it's of great urgency.
Right, right,
Go ahead.
right. That's very good. I was just gonna say, I keep forgetting, and I want to say at the beginning, but one of the most important tips for finances when you move to Canada or to the US is your social security number needs to be kept private. And you don't give it to anybody. You don't give it over the phone. You don't give it like to websites online that you don't fully trust. And even then, like be super cautious. Even if it looks legit, talk to somebody who's been in Canada longer and ask them if this is a normal time that you would have
Yep.
to like provide that number, because you can get identity fraud. Like you can get really in a lot of trouble very quickly. That's
I
it.
heard the other day
Oh,
that you can actually get your social insurance number if you land in an airport that's big, let's say in Toronto or Montreal,
mhm.
and it has a Service Canada kiosk. You can actually get your social insurance number when you land. So
Okay.
it's a pretty important card to get. So just as a tidbit. And also, generally in Canada, no one is ever going to call you to confirm your financial information. That is the number one
Yeah.
way to get scammed.
Yep.
And now that they're using the AIs to replicate your loved one voices, the other one too is make sure that you have a secret family word between you and your loved ones so that when anyone does call and whatever it is that they're
Yeah.
asking, that you are confirming. And if you don't hear the secret word, chances are it's not legit,
Yeah.
especially for
That's
people who
good.
are elderly newcomers too. I mean, can
Yeah.
you imagine how difficult it is for them?
It's really yeah, it's rough. If anything sounds like it's even a little bit off, always be double, triple checking. A lot of scams, like you can look up online and they'll tell you if it's a scam or not because other people have been scammed by it. They've gone through that. So,
Never
internet can
ever
be
give
very
your
good.
passwords to people online. Never ever give your complete credit card number online. They have their own verification systems. If anyone's asking you, it's funny. You would think, with all the experiences that I have, that you would think I'm immune. But the other day I was working on my QuickBooks and a message popped up and I called the company and I thought, this sounds a little bit odd. And it wouldn't let me finish my HST returns and so forth. I ended up paying this company because, they said everything's corrupt. And then I kind of stopped for a sec because I was in a complete panic. It was due in a few hours. I ended up calling QuickBooks back and they're like, what are you talking about? We have no idea. The website was dead match for the QuickBooks. The only thing that caught me off guard was the speed that they were talking. Everybody was not speaking like they were in Canada. It just
Yeah.
didn't sound right at all. And I kept being sent from one person to the other. And then they tried to, I conferenced them in, called that company back. And let me tell you, they refunded my money pretty quickly. But what I'm saying is no one is immune to it. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
smart you are, how long you've been here. They are getting very astute. And the other one is always check what is on your credit card, what's coming out
Yeah.
of your bank account. A lot of the scammers, what they do is they take out $5, $10, $15. Well, imagine when they do that a million times, how much they end up making. So, which brings me to the back to the point of know where every one of your dollar is going and assign a job to your dollar. Do you like your money is like you having a business. And a lot of people I find they kind of money manage them as opposed to them managing the money. And honestly, I don't understand. There's no reason for it. But you have a lot more control over your particular emotions. Not that you want to control your emotions, but I'm just saying manage them and not have any undue stress. Usually, the stress and the anxiety comes from the unknown, and the
Right.
fear comes from you not asking the right questions or not having the proper skill sets. So just face that, cover those gaps, and go for it. You are capable of so much. I mean, you've changed different countries. Not many people can say there's not many things that are harder than that. Well, having kids, but
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here today. We've been
my
talking for
pleasure.
like an hour and 16 minutes now. So I'm pretty happy with I think we got all of the topics that I wanted to cover. Really retirement was a really big one for me. And you talked with the different types of savings plans and things like that. So again, this video is not meant to be comprehensive or include everything you need to know or that would be good to know even. It's just to give you a couple starting off points so you can be like, oh, I should look more into this. Um, if anybody has any comments or questions, you can definitely put them down in the comments below and we'll try to get back to you. Of course, go check out Nazreen's channel. The link is in the info bar and she talks a lot more about finance and stuff like that than I do. So you'll find answers to quite a few questions that you might have directly already on her channel. Her videos are very straightforward and to the point, which is great. Yeah, but it was great chatting with you guys. And of course, if you missed the beginning, don't worry. There will be a rediffusion. The video is going to start over at the beginning soon. Love you guys lots. Bye.
thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.